it'll start recording. So I'll start watching what I say.
We didn't record your ice cream story, so.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, well, welcome all. Sorry it's been a few weeks since we've met after one cancellation, but we're reconvening. Today we're going to talk, have Mike walk us through some energy management business process models. Hopefully spurn some discussion how it fits in with our own utilities and any opportunity that we have to expand on those models as it fits each one of us and the energy management within our realm as a whole. So with that, I think I'll pass things over to Mike to get us started.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. You should be able to see that now. And what you are seeing is Eric's model. So what we intended to do today is start with this, sort of summarize where we ended with this model, and then happen to have some literature reference to a paper that described energy management in industry, and the useful part of that paper was that it was focused pretty much on ISO 50001, and that gives us the right perspective, but also is a model that extends what Eric has done in certain ways, and in going through it, you may get some thoughts about how it is you're doing things in your utility, and how it relates, or how we might be able to elaborate on what Eric has done to further expand the models that we have for energy management. Not that the models that you will see that I'll show is exactly like what you do or want to do, but its purpose is to just generate some thought and discussion. So recall what Eric had done for GLWA is there are three roles, swim lanes defined in it, with the energy team at the top, and then finance and operations. And just as a intro to the tool that we're using here, recall that this is business process modeling notation. And it's as part of the WISE program, one of our mandates is to try to encourage development of models using BPMN, really for a couple of purposes. One is that it's a very modern and robust standard that is widely used, so everyone can across many industries. So it's the de facto standard for doing business process mapping these days. But especially for WISE, it gives us a way, if we do it right, we both represent the model accurately, represent what was happening accurately, but also it makes it easier to convey meaning, so that when we share things, everyone that has a knowledge of the standard, and that's not hard to achieve, by the way, then it's easy to interpret what others are doing. So as a way to share information, it's a great tool. So what you're seeing, and as I walk through this thing, I'll sort of point out the meaning of these graphical icons. But the essence of this was that every month there's this process starts. And then what happens and causes it to start is the receipt of an utility electric bill. And after a couple, 3 days, there's another event that occurs. These are events, these little round things. And then when that happens, they look at the utility data. The energy team is involved. Remember, this is the finance group. This is the role that has primary responsibility. But the energy team is involved in this. There's a system that's used. There are documents that are created as a result of it. After that's done, then after that task or activity is done, then which is pretty much an automated task, there's a decision. Is there a deviation from the budget or history? If there is, it bounces down to operations, and they have to do some investigations, develop an energy usage report. If not, then it goes over here where this symbol means this is a gateway, and this means that two things happen at the same time in parallel. One is they go ahead and pay the bill, and the other one is it bounces up to Eric's energy team, which is waiting for this process to complete. What happened up here was that this is another parallel gate. There's some information collection and some processing of data. This done manually, this is what this icon means up here. This one done automatically, this is what this icon means. And then when those two tasks are done, it's sitting there waiting for this to complete. And when that's done, they sync up and they normalize the data to produce a KPI report, and then goes into a task which is called report and review energy usage and coordinate the ongoing activities. So,
Mike?
yes, go ahead, John.
There's a question. If you can make the graphic larger, so maybe if you can zoom in and move it around, I think maybe, yes, thank you. Folks are having trouble seeing, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we can see the relevant part of this. So can you see it okay? Anybody? Let me put the chat up so I can see messages come in. All right. So where we left off was that clearly report and review energy usage and coordinate ongoing activities is a big task. I mean, it's one of the things that's at the heart of what Eric's energy team does. And the thought was, well, maybe we need to extend or elaborate this, or the larger, the entire process model in various ways. And this is where, the various contributors might pitch in and, pick a part of this model and develop it further. So, any questions so far? Just stop there before I move to this bigger model. Okay, so as I mentioned at the beginning, we did have a model that came from the literature. I'm gonna first show this whole thing in its entirety, but I'll blow it up here.
Mike,
yes,
just to show, just to say, to model the business process, to document it in this way is part of the WISE improvement strategy, so that we would start with an as is and then use that as is model to develop a desired state. So just kind of, how it fits in, you know what I mean? If you can. That's all.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so looking at this at the highest level, and this model is taken from a paper that elaborated an industry energy management business process in BPMN, and with a particular focus on how it would support the ISO 50001 standard. So it should have some of the aspects that you would see in that standard. But at a high level, a couple of things to notice. There are groups here. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 groups, which at the top are labeled bigger. A planning part over here on the left. Next, an implementation and operation. Then a verification step, and then a management review, and then the end of this energy management cycle. So let me just walk through what's happening here. Not that I'm the expert on this particular energy management business process, but I can interpret what is described here, and then think about, as we walk through it, areas where you might have a lot of questions or opinions about what's here, but also where you might be able to elaborate further on the in the business process model that we want to create for case studies in WISE. So as before, we've got a policy and strategy definition process that needs to initiate. And when it does, then they define this policy and designate an energy manager. And then what happens next? These are all in sequence. So these are just tasks that happen in sequence. Then it passes, there's a pass of responsibility to the energy management team here, who creates the team, I guess, brings the people together. Management approves it, and then they identify and comply with any legal requirements that may be necessary. And then they start an energy review, this acronym ER. Once that's done, then they goes back to the energy management team. They analyze the objectives, targets, and action plans. Management approves that. Then they implement the objectives, targets, and actions plan. So their strategy gets implemented. And here, then we've hit the first stage gate, which is milestone here. And we could indicate that with a little event when that planning phase is done. And then what happens over here in our implementation and operations stage is designing the facility equipment and services that are going to be required. A big task that ends up with some design documents. These all done within the context of complying with those targets, objectives, and the action plans and the policy that came out of the planning phase. So then after that, we see that there is a checking available resources. And here again is another one of those parallel gateways. That means that, these two things happen simultaneously. Is there a question somewhere? I guess I'm getting a little indicator here. I guess not.
No.
No, I just posted the information that BPMN is also an ISO standard, and I posted it again just because some people joined and they would not have been able to see the reference. That's all.
Oh, thanks, Jello. Okay, so where do we leave off? We're in this implementation stage, and this, things happen in parallel now. This over here and whatever goes up top looks like they start a training and energy education process. But then up here, there's an approval step that needs to be done before, again, by top management. So this is the top management role. And then it bounces back down to, where are we? Engineering, which does the installation of improvements, either the capital improvements or some new accommodation for the existing equipment if it's just a process improvement. These Scott mentioned yesterday, which I think is a good point, that these improvements could be business process improvements, not just operational process improvements. So there could be a lot of different tasks that are rolled into whatever this strategy may be, and the designs that get created that could include business processes. So, we got to think about, and this is a kind of a modeling business mapping technique, but now that we've launched these parallel processes, in reality, what's happening? Well, this is happening down here, independent of anything that's going on up here. And we got approval. It comes back down to the install. We have to capture the synchronization of all those activities. And that's what this gateway does here and again over here. It's joining a number of paths that come together in one place and synchronizing them. So when all of that's done, then we can check the equipment and the process improvement, and that gets us to the end of the implementation and operations stage. We got another, milestone event right here, which is when that is complete, and we've gone through all of these tasks or activities. They're done, and then we can move on to verification stage, which looks to be verifying the action plans. That's done by, what is this role? The energy management team. And engineering evaluates expected versus actual energy consumption. And there's an energy database. So this is an icon that indicates some storage and persistence of some data about energy into a database, which would probably occur. Now, after that, then, well, those two things happen in parallel. Here's a good clear case where we've got a parallel gateway, and this one does a split, this does the join, synchronizes everything, and now we move on to the next stage, which is what's our stage? Management review. So the energy management team completes an audit. There's an energy management system report. It gets passed up to senior management, who reviews the report, issues any resolutions that need to be, or issues that need to be resolved. Those get resolved by the energy management team, and then this flow of execution passes it back to management review, who does a critical analysis, addresses any issues or nonconformities in the report, produces a final report. This is a document object, and then that ends the energy management cycle. So there you go. That's the process, again, as depicted by these folks. And any questions on any of this? Make sense? Anything not make sense?
So this is pretty closely aligned with 50,001 from what you saw about this BPMN.
Yeah, again, they took that plan, do, check, act perspective, and the details of what happens in each one of these activities, whatever they may be, presumably would follow that. Let me just say one other thing is that, as you pointed out before, Eric, this is a kind of business process where you have a larger, strategy development, selection of new projects, and then implementation of those projects, and stage gates at each different point. This is very similar to what we saw in the CIP business process model, where we had these stage gates at various places where, after the strategy development, there's a portfolio creation of a portfolio of projects, which then get implemented. And that has its own particular issues and tasks, which may be different from the everyday management of existing energy resources. Maybe Eric, you could talk to that a bit.
Yeah, I like that this is like fully comprehensive, how it goes from the strategy to projects that are implemented conserve energy to the reporting. I think what the challenge when I was doing mine, and I have a hard time wrapping my head around this, is how does the time sequencing happen for this? I mean, the strategy is the start. That almost feels like the start of your energy plan, your management plan. So this is your new initiative. The implementation and operation almost seems like a cycle. That almost seems like there should be a repeating event in there that feeds the remaining. And like, what's the cadence for the output of the report at the end? It would if we did this for GLWA, would we put some timing into some of these events? Is this more of a broad ranging generic example? And how do you make this that we decide we want to do an annual report? How does the BPMN make that work? Because I ultimately split mine apart because I had unsequenced events going on in my first iteration of my business process model. I kind of had my monthly activity, but then I tried to put in these longer time series activities along, and I had a hard time figuring out how to make those go together.
Yeah, it's a great question and a common one. Time evolves from left to right in these diagrams. And those sorts of cycles occur in two ways. One that you mentioned, feedback cycles. You notice there aren't any in this one. Everything's going to the right. Nothing's going back. And the other way that those cycles occur, of course, is by when things trigger. So this is this thing I'm pointing at here is the timer at the beginning.
So Eric,
it triggers every so often. So that would create a cycle. And the representation here is that this happens on a regular basis. Maybe it's quarterly, maybe it's yearly, maybe it's whatever. And then it ends, and then it starts again. So that's the other way that those cycles get represented. But the process model should accurately capture what you described.
Mike, if you can
Yes.
go down and just to that down and to the right a little bit. To the right. Yeah, there's a box here that says under operation, check overall equipment or process improvement performance. I think that there's what the kind of feedback that you're suggesting is that once you check it, you may want to make some operational adjustments. And I think that this is what Eric was speaking from experience. Would that be accurate, Eric?
Yeah, and in general, it's when we go all the way to the left at the start of the process, there's some very, you're creating a team like that. To me, wouldn't be something that would happen necessarily on a time basis. Maybe you evaluate the team but this seems. It kind of feels like a one-time process. And then in the implementation side, if we wanted to say this is an annual process, because I look at like the report at the end, that's a good, annual report's a good time sequence to report out on what accomplished this year. That implementation and doing an engineering and designs and then actual construction, at GLWA, nothing happens in a year. if we're going to do a project, it's going to be 3 years would be like aggressive. So those are the challenges I see. But I love that it does incorporate everything. I love that it has all the pieces. I'm just struggling to understand how you'd loop in the timing.
How does your piece fit in, Eric, right? David Ponder has had his hand up for quite a while.
I'm sorry about that. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, this is very similar to kind of a concept we've been working towards in this discussion about, how does it, is it cyclical? Is it linear? What parts are cyclical and what parts are linear? One thing that kind of helped me get my head wrapped around some of this a little bit is thinking about some of this work happens sort of at a higher strategic level. So things like early on here, like what is the charter of the energy management team? What are our legal requirements? What are high level strategies and objectives and things like that? That all sort of starts, that happens at a higher strategy level. And then some of the other things are really more tactical, sort of, the equipment inventory, the performance, the plan to assess and monitor the performance and the energy performance indicators and yada, yada, yada. And I think each actually has a feedback loop in it, right? And what the right frequency of that is, who knows, right? I'm reminded of there's this like continuous improvement visual where it's sort of like this slope rising up and the kind of the loop is always going on. And so you're kind of constantly trying to push that cycle up, that incline of improvement. One thing else that popped out at me is I think this early part, this objective setting planning and actions, I think there's a lot more work in there that actually is to occur. Maybe you can scroll down just a little bit. So this energy review process, and I've seen, and I have some documentation. I was just trying to pull it up around sort of what that process looks like. I think that's kind of a spot where we could flesh that process out some more, right? You know, collect, you know, what is the data collection? What is the data management plan? What is the prioritization plan? Where are you doing audits? Those sorts of things. That could have its own sort of like sub-process, right? And then later on in the cycle, there was this thing about sort of training, and maybe I just kind of missed it in because there's a lot in here. One of the big things that jumped out at us when we kind of took a look at this is this concept of standardization and you know, developing the standards and some of that's, you know, so you have this providing this training, energy, and education. Well, you have to have like the thing that you're training them on defined. And so whether that's SOPs or what have you, there's some of that there that I think could be, you know, there's more there is all. There's a lot, right? This is a lot. And I think this is where, you know, we all get overwhelmed. There's just so much. And then let's, you know, for us, the other issue that we have is overlay this now on top of 10 wastewater treatment plants and 80 lift stations. How do you go about implementing this thing across all of your facilities? Are you doing this at a facility by facility level? Are you doing this at you know, are you trying to implement this all at once? Are you staggering the implementation over time? And then that just confuses the sort of like the timing piece even more, which, coming back to the original point I was making, sometimes it's helpful then to step away from that and say, okay, or there's this higher level strategy piece that's going on. That's a process that we can look at and we can identify. And then tactically, there's this process that we're implementing and we're rolling out that implementation over time at various locations. So food for thought.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I just pointed out, I just added a couple of arrows here, which is the way you'd represent the fact that whatever is getting designed, these new changes would also obviously be an input to checking resources, and presumably those SOPs and other information would be what they're training on. So there's at least one way to represent that in the model.
That's a bit of a big presumption.
Yeah.
Scott has his hand up.
Yeah, just thinking, I mean, back to kind of Eric's comment and real good comments, David, and I think David and George have been spending quite a bit of time in that planning space there too. But this sort of talks about it's around designing facilities, equipment, and services. I think designing services is maybe more operational because, as you point out, this may not have as its purpose to develop new facilities or design new, you know, kind of pumps or structures, but it might be more around operations and maintenance and those aspects. I think maybe it's just the jargon that's used. It's probably covered here, but basically the review of the operation itself for efficiency and cost effectiveness and all of that is something that has this cycle to it. So you got these, like you have in your model, Eric, you have a monthly cycle, really a billing type of cycle, and you use that billing cycle to inform how you're doing and stuff. And a lot of it has to do with the operation, not just the design of new facilities, which again are real longer term.
Mia had a comment in the chat line that she liked the process map, and eventually this should become integrated. This should become integrated into the culture. There's also a back feed from O&M to design, facility, and equipment. There should be CIP post-review analysis through the energy optimization lenses. She had to leave to another meeting, so I just wanted to mention that was a comment that she left.
Good comments.
Yeah, I
Okay.
really liked David's point of the higher level, the strategic level and the tactical level. I think one thing I've learned from this group is the energy management within our utilities focuses on different things, and it's usually because we have limited resources. So some groups are on that, are focused on that strategic. I personally have been on that tactical. It's hard to do all of it. Overwhelming, like David said, but I like this capturing, kind of the scope of both levels.
Mike, is the purpose of what you're doing here to say if this is an overall comprehensive model, then these different sub-processes can be broken out and, further developed, like if just like Eric was focusing on certain aspects, and David maybe, Josh and George and others maybe focusing on other parts, and that can be further documented?
Yeah, I think we've identified, in my brain anyway, there's 3 that have been identified. Well, one Mia just proposed. There's some refinement and feedback that would address some of the timing issues that David and Eric talked about. David was talking about this training and how it relates to, and the possible strong assumptions we've made. Maybe we need to elaborate more on that. And what was the third one? The third one was related to, I guess David also brought this up, elaborating what's going on in planning. The paper that we looked at and that from which this BPMN model was taken also included another BPMN model, which was a further elaboration of what happens in planning. So we won't go through that here, but anyway, just know that there is some work that we can borrow from that includes extending all of this planning phase. So yeah, Scott, there's lots of different places where people could take a chunk, address one or all of those issues.
On Mia's point, I mean, one thing to note, and Eric's been a little involved in this, is some of the other teams, for example, the asset management team is dealing with kind of repair versus replacement kinds of decisions and life cycle around, pumps themselves, looking at the pump asset class. And, there's definitely a feed in here. And in fact, they want Eric to go present to them on the energy component because they're dealing with the labor components. But there's a relationship here to asset management decisions, when you get to replacement.
Yeah, there's a huge connection to asset management. I mean, energy can be, energy consumption is clearly an indicator of the performance of the asset. And if we're seeing declines in like pump performance over time, then, that can be an indicator that something's not right. Or, yeah. One other thing to think about it is, I like this idea of sort of like, what are the chunks that people could take on, and because if you try, this is my challenge, is like you look at this from soup to nuts, it feels really daunting. So the idea of thinking about how you can kind of like segment some of these things out and sort of make them more modular I think I like that idea a lot. And helping kind of take people through stepwise. And again, there are good resources out there. There's the 5001 Ready framework that DOE has. I know DOE's expressed interest in doing more work with the sector. So there's maybe an opportunity to partner with them on some of that, customizing some of that to wastewater or water utilities. Yeah.
David, you've been out of commission for a little while and have
yeah, sorry, I've
but
been
no apologies,
pulled away.
But we had talked about, I mean, one of the obvious next steps for you might be to take that chunk, over on the planning side and basically model that for your utility. I mean, you may have already done it, but to basically fill in that gap and make it more robust, and that would be really, really useful for the team as a whole.
Sure. I could work on that.
And we've talked about breaking this into separate models, but now that we're looking at this and we're talking about the entire program with sub-processes in it, how does that typically work, Mike? I mean, would it be better to have this large entirety model with the sub-processes as mini models basically, and have it all combined, or have separate models for different activities?
Yeah, well, there's nothing that prevents us from, doing either of the options that you that you described there. But I think, maybe Cello and Scott, you can weigh in on what we as WISE would like to achieve for this for the program.
I can say that we want to maintain a balance that so that whatever utilities who are part of the program do has benefits, and it'll be great that these benefits are not very long into the future, but that it has benefits that it can be demonstrated for their utilities. So the idea would be to do something that can provide improvements that would make the program sustainable. So theoretically, it'll be really good to have one comprehensive model, but I think to get there, that we should that utilities should identify which pieces could provide the most bang for the buck for them in their current situation, and then focus on those pieces. And we can then later deal with the integration. But ideally, we would love to see several case studies where specific improvements have been made. Unfortunately, several people had to leave at the top of the hour. But our hope was that in this meeting, we can start a discussion about which utility would maybe want to take on one of these, which utility would maybe take one of these activities and look at it as a collapsed process, meaning that they would develop things underneath and say, what does it really take to, adapt to equipment replacement production plans, or the this design facilities, equipment and services. Are there any aspects of energy management that could be, that's a little bit too big of a piece perhaps, or evaluate actual versus expected energy consumption, whichever one of these things, and maybe we can go back to Eric's diagram as well, would be sort of fertile ground to explore for utilities, so that we have several kind of vertical prototypes that could be later merged. I'm going to put Keith Dyson on the spot, see I'm very happy to see him join us, and maybe he can offer some perspective from, from his viewpoint.
Well, I think that, we're not in the energy management business, unfortunately. We have our team that does that, and they're not on the call today. We were helping out to see, how this could impact maintenance activities and, other things. So I'm not sure what we can sign up for at this point.
Okay.
There's also a technology piece to all of this too that could be of interest to somebody.
Yes.
Because there's the data, there's the data analytics, there's a software associated with it, and that could be an area of focus that somebody would be interested in. And who knows, maybe Mia's interested in kind of the from O&M to design facility and the relationship of O&M and life cycle of the asset too, which is taking energy into account. That she may have an interest in that. Who knows?
Well, yeah, there were several people in the first 30 minutes that I was hoping we could engage, but most of them, maybe they had some sort of a, sense that we may try to ask them to do some homework, and they,
but yeah.
Yeah, but that was really going to be the second part of our conversation. So, David, do you see any possibilities for things that you could take on in MCES, any of these activities, and maybe go into a little bit more depth?
Sure, I'd be willing to kind of in that initial sort of energy planning portion, kind of flush that out a little bit. It's been a while since I've touched the document, but it's a good excuse to go back to it and think through sort of like, what is it that you want to do along each of those stages, in that process, equipment inventory, what kind of information be collecting, your data, what kind of initial data analysis, baseline assessment type of things that you might do. And I'd be happy to do that.
That'd be great, because that's that first planning piece that would really complement what Eric has really well. Anybody else has some thoughts? For example, what Scott said about energy, if you look at this in the upper right corner, report and review energy usage and coordinate ongoing activities. That's a piece that would have a technology component and would be kind of really interesting to dive into. But perhaps we can delay that part of the conversation for the meeting when we have a few more people on board. What do you think? Sorry.
One possibility, building on the David Ponder, who joined us, would be what Mike did was he got with Eric and basically helped Eric develop his plan here. And I'm wondering if you had time to meet with Mike, David, that you might together be able to map something out that could be shared 2 weeks from now.
Probably. I mean, if Mike's around, I could probably fit something in.
Yeah, I'm happy to help. So let me know, good time and
Yeah.
we can meet on Teams.
Yeah, why don't you and I just follow up maybe later this afternoon and we can set something up.
Okay. Great.
Okay. So I don't want to put Kuldeep on the spot, but just want to welcome him for joining our call. Did you have any comments or thoughts or suggestions?
Thank you, Tello. I'm trying to rope in a couple of experts who deal with energy at MWRD. So I am not very much involved in energy management side of the things. So hopefully next call, we will have somebody represent MWRD in the energy side of things.
That's great. That's great. And again, welcome. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you.
And Jim Haldeman, any thoughts or ideas? He's on mute. It's okay. So anyway, Eric, back to you, and perhaps we can just plan to go to do the second part, next time we meet. What do you think, Eric?
We can do that, and I did want to say the data side and the data management did interest me. The way people have been interested in the data I've collected and reported, but I don't have it very well documented. So this would be an opportunity for me to flesh some of that out. It was developed kind of in one of those agile type of methodologies where we just kept building different things and putting it together, and it's evolved, but it's probably stable enough now. The only question I would have is how does it still fit as a business process model when it's mostly automatic, when it's not a business process, when it becomes a process, almost a computer process?
That's fine, and we're seeing one of the things that we're starting to look at is to combine the work of different teams. For example, there's interest in developing digital asset management plans. So that would mean that there would be a living document, electronic document that would not be just something that's put on the shelf. So we're going to work with the asset management team and the technology team to figure out how to jointly look into that topic of digital asset management plans. That actually you could apply the same type of approach to digital energy management plan. Sorry, David.
No, I just think about the information that you need for energy management in that digital asset management plan, right? Like making sure you have your the information you need to do energy management as part of, so that's just a crossover.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So that for me would fit in. We have the Git process data in my model that Mike has on the screen right now. There's things involved with that, right?
Oh, sure.
And the report and review energy usage that we've already identified. Some of those, and even the produce KPI reports and dashboards, all of those pieces have a large digital component that I think we could flesh some of that out as a sub-process.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, Eric, I mean, I don't know what you think, but just thinking ahead here, it might be that if David were able to share at the next meeting, if he were able to share that front end planning piece, and then when the other people hopefully joined that meeting, then you could have a discussion about what other pieces they might be interested in further fleshing out in the same kind of way that that David and you did.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds great. It's weird because recently we've noticed that the number of meetings has really increased for many people, and but we're happy that so many of them did log in at least for the first half. Any additional thoughts, Eric, before we close it up?
No, I don't think so. I'm happy to see David back. So welcome back, David. I hope you got a lot of work done on your hiatus. And yeah, I think